What's up, Vetters? Patrick here with Vetted. I have an amazing video for y'all today. Jesse Michels from American Alchemy finally went on Joe Rogan's podcast, and they covered a lot of things, but one thing in particular we are going to talk about is the part of the interview where they talked about Bob Lazar, because I found it to be quite interesting, and especially how much time they gave to it. So there's a lot to cover in this video. Stay with me. We got a lot of clips and a lot of different threads we're going to pull here, all right? And I've got some exclusive footage you're going to want to see. Please hit that like button. That really helps out the videos. And of course, if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button. I put out new videos about the UFO phenomena every week. Trying to get to 100,000 subscribers before the end of the year. Let's do this, y'all. First, before we jump into these clips of Jesse Michels talking to Joe Rogan about Bob Lazar, let me refresh your memory on who Bob Lazar is in case you're not already familiar. Take a look.
We've been working on this story for a long time, and we'll tell you right up front that it's going to be hard to swallow at first.
Bob Lazar gained fame in the late 1980s for claiming he worked on reverse engineering alien spacecraft at a secretive site near Area 51 called S4.
No one who knew Area 51 from the inside ever talked publicly about the saucer stories.
Lazar alleged the U.S. government possessed extraterrestrial technology, including 9 UFOs powered by an element called 115. His story, first shared in a 1989 interview with journalist George Knapp, sparked widespread interest in UFOs in Area 51.
Dennis has remained anonymous until now. His real name is Robert Lazar, a young scientist with eclectic interests. The choice of Dennis was an inside joke. He says that's the name of his superior at Groom Lake. It wasn't a joke to Dennis.
He called right after and he said, "Do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now?" And I said, "Well, no." And he hung up the phone.
However, skeptics question his credibility due to inconsistencies in his educational and employment history, as no records confirm his claimed degrees from MIT or Caltech, and his work at Los Alamos National Laboratory appears limited to a technician role. Lazar claims there are reasons for those inconsistencies, but can't reveal that publicly.
Lazar's story is by any standards fantastic. He says he's telling it in order to protect himself. He says he was hired to work at an area called S4, which is a few miles south of Groom Lake. At S4, he says, are flying saucers, antimatter reactors, and other working examples of technology that is seemingly beyond human capabilities.
Lazar's claims inspired several books and documentaries, like the 2018 film Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers from filmmaker Jeremy Corbell.
Right, this came from somewhere else. I mean, as bizarre as that is to believe, but I mean, it's there. I saw it. I know what the current state of the art is in physics, and it can't be done.
He remains a polarizing figure, with supporters believing he exposed hidden truths and critics dismissing him as a fabricator.
Right, this came from somewhere else. I mean, as bizarre as that is to believe, but I mean, it's there. I saw it. I know what the current state of the art is in physics, and it can't be done.
He will be featured in an upcoming documentary from filmmaker Luigi Venditelli titled S4, The Bob Lazar Story.
You believe his story, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I've got to know him pretty well over the last couple of months, and I believe he's telling the truth.
Fascinating stuff. Thanks,
George.
All right, now that we're familiar with who Bob Lazar is, let's jump into this first clip of Jesse Michels speaking about Bob Lazar on Joe Rogan's podcast.
I was watching the Townsend Brown one today, and you were talking about John Lear and John Lear's connection to Bob Lazar and the possibility that Lear was spreading disinformation.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I've, by the way, since making that video, I've become more positive on Lazar, just insofar as I think he was at S4 Area 51. And there's a great documentary coming out by my buddy Luigi on this called Project Gravatar. And I think there's going to be a lot of corroborating evidence that he was at least there, and a lot in his story checks.
Now, stay with me because there's way more, but I wanted to jump in here about Luigi's new documentary about Bob Lazar, Project Gravatar, or S4, the Bob Lazar story. I got to meet Luigi in Contact in the Desert this past weekend in Palm Springs. I even spent a couple hours in the pool with him. That came out not the way I wanted it to. Yeah, I meant I hung out with him and we were in the pool. And we got to talk for quite a while about the project. And I actually got to hang out with him for a little bit in, there as well, and just get a lot of different insight about this project with Bob Lazar. And I have to admit, regardless if Bob Lazar is telling the truth or not, I don't know. And I'm not here for that. That's not what this video is about for me. You decide for yourself. But what I do know is Luigi is a really, really great guy. And his passion about this project is undeniable. And I cannot wait to see this film that he's put together about Bob Lazar. And he said there's so much in there. And he just had a lot of insights about, Bob Lazar, and he's got to spend a lot of time with them, right, making this film. So it was really good to get to talk to Luigi, and he really is a great guy. So shout out to Luigi and this new project that's coming out. I put a link in the description so you can find out more information and watch the trailer for the documentary as well, if you like. One other thing about this project is that they're doing this VR experience to accompany the film, which it'll probably come out after the film, according to Luigi. And during Contact in the Desert, Luigi let some of us wear the headset of the VR and see what it was like, and I got to put it on as well. And I have to admit, it was mind-blowing. Seeing the craft, the sport model that Bob Lazar described in full detail, it looked like a photo. Right. He's just giving us a sample of what's to come. Right. It's not the full experience, like not even close. We got like 1% of it, but I was able to see it, and it's mind blowing. So I really cannot wait for that to come out. And remember when I said I have an exclusive clip? Well, this is just a little fun clip that I want to share with you guys of Jeremy Corbell actually trying the VR headset, alongside with me. We all did together with Luigi at Contact in the Desert. And this is just a little fun clip to see what the experience is like. Take a look.
I think if you turn around, you see the 41 on the wall?
What's the pinching? Is he grabbing the joint?
I kept doing that. The screen comes up.
So Jeremy's never seen this before.
Not this one. He's seen one before, but this one's the upgraded one.
Got it.
Just you wait, brother.
Bro, I
Just
cannot
you
wait. Oh my
wait.
God, I can't wait, dude.
That is-
Seeing your face was like,
Look, my comment was, I've seen the sport model for years, right?
Yeah.
This is a whole new light.
it's like,
You see dimension.
it's immersive. Yeah. Oh my God, dude. All right, so that's Vinny Adams in there as well, talking about his experience as well, and of course Gino from the Y-Files in there too, hanging out with us. It was a lot of fun, and it was really great to get that experience from Luigi, and he let a lot of people put it on and try it and see what it looked like. I mean, he's just such a great guy, and I really look forward to this project, to be honest with you. So look, let's jump back into this clip with Jesse Michels continuing to talk about Bob Lazar and specifically the relationship with John Lear.
But I think you have to view, and I even say that in this video, that I think a lot of this story could be true. You can't, I think, view the Bob Lazar story, you can't just take it at face value, because John Lear and he were friends. John Lear is this babbling UFO nut. He's obsessed with UFOs. He's writing weird, like, disinfo-y style stuff with Bill Cooper, Behold the Pale Horse guy.
Which is a wild book.
Yeah. And so he's crazy. Bill Cooper.
Doesn't he talk about bases on the moon?
He talks about bases on the moon. Lear also talked about a soul catcher that like controlled our souls on the moon.
Oh boy.
And so Lear was like flooding the zone with all sorts of weird shit. Lear comes from an interesting family.
Right.
His father is Bill Lear, who's the autopilot wizard. He created the first business, basically the first private jet, the Lear jet, in the 50s and 60s, and was an associate of a guy I hope we talk about named Thomas Townsend Brown.
Yeah.
And so I think, Lear was engaging in all sorts of bullshit. Was he a useful idiot, or was he a sophisticated agent provocateur? I'm totally open to him having been a useful idiot. In fact, there is a video of him saying, I was told, I was given all the Bob Lazar files or whatever, and I was told about to actually, like, he said a guy named Admiral McClellan knew that I ran my mouth. I even have this video actually on the doc that I sent you, Jamie. He says, knew that I ran my mouth. So that's why we got Bob a job or whatever. And we knew that part of this stuff would leak. And it was like this limited hangout strategy on behalf of this guy named Admiral McClellan or whatever. And he was this useful idiot to sort of get it out. And I think
For what purpose?
Recruiting. You give people high level. Yeah.
Here, we hear it here.
And the MJ personnel, the original 12, have all passed away. So they get different people into these positions of MJ 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and taken over. It's degraded, so it's almost political now instead of like it was when Truman originally formed the MJ-12. It turns out that MJ-1, the head of MJ-12, is a guy named Admiral Mike McClellan. He wanted to get some of the information out because he didn't want to. He thought that some of this information should be out in the public. We don't need to keep all this secrecy. So he decided trying to figure out a way to get it to the public. So he knew that I was a blabbermouth and I would tell anything I knew. They investigated Bob Lazar and they knew that he was a genius, but that he had a background such that they could instantly discredit him. They removed all his records from MIT, from Caltech, so he couldn't prove anything. He'd go back to Caltech, no, I don't see any records here. Well, I was here. Well, no, you weren't. And he also, up in Reno at one time, he ran a cat house there. I forget what the name of the Honeysuckle Ranch it was. So they chose him because not only could he probably help them because he was so smart, and as master, he's the one that named Ununpennium 115. He's the one that told them what that was, and they didn't know when he went there. They didn't know what it was. He was the one that told them that's element 115, and then told them why and how he'd figured it out. But they decided to pick on Bob to go up there to work at S4. Because they knew that Bob would tell me instantly, and then I would blab the whole thing. And that was their modus operandi, was to get the information out and gauge what it did to the public, how they accepted it, and then pull back and say, oh, no, it was all a mistake. Bob Lazar is a fraud. He never worked here. He doesn't have any credentials like that. And they could back away and get out of it. So that was what Mike McClellan came up with.
Isn't that crazy?
Weird.
That is weird. And, John Lear is definitely a controversial figure in this community, hands down. There's no question. So it really does make it hard to separate things that John Lear says, right? If he says some crazy stuff, but then also says something that could be true, it's really hard to distinguish between the two. You're really going to need corroborating evidence. But listen to Jesse and Joe Rogan talk a little bit more about John Lear in this particular clip.
And to me,
kind of makes sense a little bit, though.
It does, and that doesn't make Bob Lazar still not the most interesting story in the world. Like, he's not saying it didn't happen, right? He's just saying that this happened as part of this limited hangout strategy where they knew that they could delete the records at MIT. They knew that they could stigmatize him because of the brothel. They knew that he was this not traditionally trained engineer who just happened to strap a ramjet on the back of a Honda or whatever and meet Edward Teller serendipitously. They knew that they had plausible deniability on all of that stuff. There's a great line in the Oppenheimer movie where Leslie Groves, played by Matt Damon, says, "I didn't hire Oppenheimer in spite of his communist sympathies. I hired him because of them." So if you have a top secret program, you want compromise on people. You want to be able to blackmail them. And so I think, that should be taken at face value, in my opinion. And the reason that the story itself can't be taken at face value and needs to be seen through that lens is Lear and Bob Lazar were friends before Bob Lazar got a job at Area 51, S4. And so if you have a top secret program, you're going to do a basic background check. And Lear is going to come up as a guy with a UFO blog, right? And then the CIA is all over the UFO program, right? And he was flying CIA cargo jets. And he says that he disaffiliated in 83. That's bullshit. George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell have talked about how that's BS. And actually disaffiliated much later into the mid-'80s or whatever. Why would you continue to pay a guy who is leaking your crown jewel secrets? And then the guards at Area 51 knew John Lear. John Lear and Jim Goodall, his buddy, who's a photographer, had been camping out at Area 51 for the better part of a decade. Like the security guards there knew him. Jeremy Corbell has talked about in interviews, like I would go with John Lear and he would show me around or whatever, and they would like let him through. And before leaking the Bob Lazar story to George Knapp, he leaked a story about the F-117, which is the first stealth craft in the U.S. And so I think that helped establish sort of, credibility or legitimacy. Was he a useful idiot or agent provocateur? I don't know. There's a photo of John Lear with G. Gordon Liddy, who's like as deep and spooky as it gets.
I met him.
No way.
He was on Fear Factor.
No way.
Yeah.
G. Gordon Liddy was on Fear Factor?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
You're not messing with me.
No. G. Gordon Liddy was on Fear Factor. Yeah.
What?
Now, this was actually a pretty funny part of the interview where they go into Liddy on Fear Factor and they show some clips and kind of, joke about that a little bit and get sidetracked. But then they do come back to Bob Lazar again, and this really is a juicy part right here. Take a look.
So how did Lazar know what element 115 was?
I don't know. So element 115, elements are just differentiated by the number of protons. So it is easy to predict there will be an element 115 before element 115 gets discovered. If they have, I think they don't have a stable version of Moscovium, which is element 115. And so if they can find some stable version, I think he'll be super vindicated based on that.
Well, they think he has a stable version.
I know that. Yeah.
They think that was part of, during Jeremy Corbell's documentary that he was doing on Lazar, he was raided by the FBI. They raided his lab, and he thinks that's what they were looking for.
That is wild.
Yeah.
I think there is so much real about the Lazar story. I think he was at S4. I think he met Edward Teller. I think he was at Los Alamos. I think he was at MIT. I know there's some stuff he told you offline.
Mm-hmm.
MIT's engaged in a lot of spooky stuff where you can't talk about what you were doing. There's a lot of federally funded weird stuff going on there.
Yeah, if you want to teach your people how to do something that's kind of fucked up, you would send them to MIT.
100%.
Yeah.
EG&G came from Doc Edgerton, who was, MIT faculty, and that's where he ended up working after meeting Edward Teller was EG&G. So I believe there's a lot in that story that's super true. I'm just, that lens, you need to apply that lens.
Right.
The limited hangout lens.
Well, it's also like, what is he dealing with really? Like, what is the craft? Is that thing ours? Did we have something in 1988 that was that sophisticated, or is that really back engineered?
So look, again, like I said before at the beginning of this video isn't really about proving Bob Lazar's story, right or wrong. It's not really for me to decide for you whatsoever. Right? You really need to decide for yourself, because I've been thinking about his story a lot, and people really try to corner you in when Bob Lazar gets brought up. Do you believe him or you don't believe him? You think he's lying or you think he's not lying? Like, just an all-encompassing, he's either all lying or all telling the truth, right? And I think I just decided there's no way for me to know that. It really just comes down to, letting his story be told and people deciding for themselves, because at minimum, Bob Lazar coming out did confirm S4 and Area 51 for the very first time ever. That is true, right? And then at maximum, if that's how you say it, Bob would be the greatest whistleblower to ever exist in the history of humanity based on what he said, right? So maybe the truth is somewhere there in the middle. I don't know, but I look forward to projects like what Luigi is putting forward with Project Gravatar / S4, the Bob Lazar story, because, again, people should be allowed to come out and tell their stories the most fair way possible, right? And, again, everyone should decide for themselves. You're really going to have to make that decision, just like so many things in this field. But, look, great interview on Joe Rogan with Jesse Michels. I highly recommend checking out the whole thing. Jesse, as you know, is just a great communicator, and it's a phenomenal episode, as always. So, we got that AJ file that AJ Y-Files episode with Joe Rogan last week, and then we get Jesse Michels this week. Things are going good, y'all. So anyway, links in the description. Go check it out. We'll see you guys on the next one. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace.